Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now to the first reaction directly from Michael Cohen, the president's a lawyer, fixer, speaking exclusively to CNN's Don Lemon about the FBI raid on his office, his home, his hotel room. Don is joining us now live. Don, thanks so much for doing this. These are Cohen's first comments since all this went down. Tell our viewers what he's saying to you tonight.
Well, I've got to be honest with you, Wolf. He's concerned mostly about his family, and he's upset. He's saddened by this. Who would have to have your home and your businesses raided? He wouldn't go into detail about the raid because his lawyers are steering him away from that. But he did say that, in his words, the raids were upsetting. He says in the least, but in contrast to what the president said about the raid yesterday, he described these agents as having broken into his office. Not the president said they had broken into his office. He said that they were courteous. They could not have been nicer. He stressed the opposite of what the president did. And we have the direct quote from him saying, "I'm not happy with my personal residence office being raided, but I have to say that the members of the FBI conducted the search. The FBI that conducted the search and seizure were all extremely professional, courteous, and respectful." And again, he said he even thanked the agents after they left, but he wouldn't go into detail again because obviously this is a legal matter and he doesn't want to get himself into trouble.
Did he say anything, Don, about if he thinks he's at risk? Is he worried?
Well, I think in the end he says that he believes that everything he did was legal. And that will be proven. Everything he did when it comes to Stormy Daniels, he believes that part is legal. But when I said to him, I said, "Listen, are you worried about this?" And he said, I would. He said, "I'd be lying if I told you that I wasn't worried about this. I'd be lying if I told you that I'm not. Do I need this in my life? No. Do I need to be involved in this kind of thing? No," he says. But again, he's worried about his family. He says if he had to do this all over again, I asked him, I said, "Would you do it?" And he said, "Well, as up until yesterday with this raid, he probably would, but I think he would rethink how he handled the payment to Stormy Daniels. He's deeply loyal to the president, but I think he would rethink he may not do it again the way that he did it this time, or the last time."
Did he say how he would handle it the next time if he had a do-over?
No, he did not. He didn't want to go into it, but I think he would rethink. I think he didn't realize and didn't expect that it would have the impact on his family that it's had on his family. Again, and this is according to another source that I spoke to after I spoke to Michael Cohen. I started digging around and doing some investigating. A source is telling CNN that his wife was there with him at the time and that his daughter came in, and obviously they were upset about it. And again, during the raid, that they collected, financial documents, all kinds of information that he wasn't sure about why they were collecting it. But again, he said they were courteous, and opposite of what the president said, they were courteous, and he wanted to thank them for it.
It is Wednesday, the 11th of April of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well, David, if you caught his show, was delayed a bit because of an emergency orthodontic emergency that he had to go to. And I had my own medical emergency occur last night. Not me, but my mother's been ailing a bit. And we took her into ER last night. She got a CAT scan, and she's been feeling rather bad for a few days. Well, quite a while, actually. And been, would get bronchitis, kind of knock that out. Some other issues that have just been long running that we've been attending to for years as it is. But now I suppose divulging medical information about my mom might be a violation of HIPAA, but I figure since my mom likes to talk about like my medical stuff to the neighbors, well, I'm just going to do it so the whole world will know. I'm not going to give specifics, but regardless, she has some gastrointestinal issues, and they put her on some pretty strong antibiotics, the kind that I always call the insecticides. So she's got some bugs in her from, the way it is. I can't pronounce the ailment she has. Other people can. You don't want to eat sunflower seeds, poppy seeds, that kind of stuff. So, not Crohn's. Oh boy! But that I was up until what? Well, we got home just around 2:00 in the morning. I had a few things to shut down. And then up bright and early at 5 to start my day and get this show ready. So here we are. Enough about me. Trump, as far as I know, hasn't blown up the world. He might be blowing up the world right now. And I will be getting announcements from the crew. If he ever fires Mueller, then we'll go live for that. But, if he does blow up the world, I may just feel the heat flash before I get the news of it, because sometimes I put myself in a little bubble, not the cone of silence like Pruitt has, because that cone of silence, I think, or I know that Pruitt has, ostensibly is his direct link to God, and God tells him what to do. So I guess God is a corrupt grifter. I don't know. See, I used to think that there's just one God, but I talk to these Christians, and every sect of Christianity has their own specific God that they worship to. There's a whole sect of Christians who worship Jesus with M16. I looked at the Roman pantheon of stone gods in the plaza, and I just never saw the Jesus with the M16. But it was bound to happen. Speaking of Jesus with an M16, remember when Trump said, that he would never telegraph, what he's going to do with his military? Well, he's not going to use the telegraph. That's old-fashioned way of communicating. He's going to go on live TV or tweet that he's going to attack Syria, and Putin better look out because the missiles are coming, and so get out of the way. He does that. Paul Ryan is ready to quit Congress. Well, couldn't happen fast enough, but it kind of makes you wonder why. Target fires an employee for neo-Nazi slogans. And I know there's going to be people say, but he has a constitutional right to his opinions. Yeah, well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater either, can you? The Trump Organization keeps suing cities over property taxes even after Trump became president. We'll look at that later on in the week. This is the story that stuns me. Apparently, the ABC News crew was stunned by Comey comparing Trump to a mob boss. I mean, this is a news crew, and I think they're in New York even. God, it was shocking. Oh, you mean that Comey actually made it public and verbalized it? They all know it. They think it, but they dare not name it. Because they know where their money comes from, apparently. How can Stephanopoulos and his news crew be stunned by somebody calling Trump a mob boss. Jeez. I mean, it's his way of business. But let's not be droll. So, yeah, ABC, come on. I don't know. And I'm really over this thing about the generational divide, as exemplified in the Zuckerberg hearing. I hate this whole thing about generational stuff. If we want to get into generational stuff, we can. Because I have my own complaints about the younger generation. And I have a lot of complaints about the older generation. And I have a lot of complaints about my own generation. But I hate this thing where they go on and on like, oh, Zuckerberg, he's like, he can't seem to get these old fogies to understand what the technology is. The old fogies are just by default just so stupid. They got to get a 3-year-old to program their VCR. No one has VCRs anymore, by the way. Because I thought Senator Dick Durbin made a salient point. I think that he understands what the internet is completely. Zuckerberg's not willing to let people know that he's at a particular hotel. I guess he turned off the geolocating device on his device. He doesn't want to know, he doesn't want people to know the private messages that he had with friends, family, and business associates. And he certainly doesn't want his data out there so people can sell him things or brainwash him. He doesn't like being the product. If we're the product, it's perfectly fine. He has no problem when we are the product. So I might have a complaint. Some people could say, oh, the old fogies don't understand the internet and technology. But I also might say that Zuckerberg might have been treated a bit better if he was a more rounded individual, someone who had actually matured. Because he is stunted. His moral core is stunted. Because he hit what I call the coding lottery at the age of 19. And he probably had been served better if he had taken, a year off maybe. And read some humanities, gotten into the humanities. He could have read Descartes, Dickens, and Durrell. And I think that at least he would have planted the seedling of a moral core, because he showed none while sitting in front of those senators yesterday. And now he's going to sit in front of the House today, which reminds me, Devin Nunes is a traitor. He wants to impeach Christopher Wray? What the hell? Oh, there's so much more that we could talk about, but let's look at the stories that we have curated for you today. Of course, Michael Cohen broke his silence about the FBI raids on his home, offices, and hotel room. And that was Don Lemon relaying the info. Thank you, Don. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, the recent teacher strikes in Oklahoma and West Virginia show how terrible conditions for educators can be in Republican-dominated states. Well, if you've been tasked by the Russians for the last several years and you've got a lot of Russian money to deconstruct the administrative state, I'm sorry. Knight takes rook. The Fox offices in London were raided by European Commission investigators. Murdoch. And the UN Security Council is urged to prevent an uncontrollable escalation in Syria. Hey, Vlad, the missiles are coming. Get out of the way. We're going to bomb a bunch of empty tarmacs, okay? But just get out of the way. We're coming, okay? We'll let you know when we're done. After the break, of course, we'll move to the chef's table, where the Kern County, California sheriff is caught on tape saying it costs less to kill suspects than to wound them. Talk about lack of a moral core. And Queen Elizabeth thinks Trump is an annoying sound. Oh, yes, it is. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. On the rightish of the page is the chat room link, and our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln, monitors that throughout the day. So if you have any concerns, questions, requests, etc., that is one way. To get a fairly quick response, you can also follow Netroots Radio at Netroots Radio on Twitter. And Tom takes care of that, and he has some rather pithy pronouncements and sharing of information for you. So do follow us there. We are also on Facebook as Netroots Radio. If you still want to go there, some people do. And follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I also post these show notes and links for the show on my Daily Co's diary. And I'm on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam, my real name. I didn't make it up. It was given to me. And now I've had to live up to it. The pretentious part was almost, natural. They name you what you are, you know. Okay, let's see. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn, etc., etc., etc. Oh, I forgot to mention, to the leftish of the chat room link are the Donate Contribute buttons. And once again, we'll be migrating to another Patreon and PayPal accounts and Square Cash or whatever it is. And we hope that that's seamless. But stay tuned for that, and we'll let you know when that migration has occurred, and we should. So, all right. Okay. Let's go ahead and start. All right. Let me just mention this real quick. Frances Livings provides the music for the show, and do check her shows out in Southern California. She plays quite often, and I'll give you some specific show dates here tomorrow and Friday, I promise. And she plays all over the Southland, and her band is tight. It is way tight. And she is a lovely performer and writes many of her songs that she's not covering, of course, but she writes many of the songs, so very talented. And links to her work on not just music, but she also writes and does criticisms of art. So that can be found at the links provided at my Daily Co's diary. Okay, starting off here is an article by Alex Henderson from Alternet. Did you know that Alternet was bought out by Raw Story? But they are still going to have, Alternet will have their more in-depth long read. And then Raw Story, of course, is an aggregate that I like Raw Story. It gets me to where I want to go, and I can get to those sources. So, but I just thought that was interesting because I like Alternet. And I like Raw Story. I hope it works out. Well, the conditions that conservatives have been promoting in red state public schools are not those of an advanced society, but rather the economy of a developing country. Because when you're deconstructing the administrative state, you go from an advanced economy, an advanced and elevated society, and you bring it down, and you bring it down, and pretty soon you're at you're at a developing country. Wow. Okay, well, 2018 may very well go down in history as the year in which public school teachers in Republican-controlled states finally became fed up and rebelled. So far this year, statewide teacher strikes have taken place in Oklahoma and West Virginia. Teachers have been protesting in Kentucky as well, and a statewide walkout is being considered in Arizona. When Oklahoma's teachers when the Oklahoma teachers strike entered its second week on April 9th, teachers in that very Republican state had a long list of grievances. The minimum starting salary for teachers in Oklahoma is only $31,600, the lowest in the U.S., according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I got to tell you, though, in many, many areas of rural America in which I'm at, they consider that to be a fairly good wage. Of course, it's by people who have haven't worked in the last 30 or 40 years, and they think that, a dozen eggs cost 25 cents. I remember when I walked 10 miles to get a dozen eggs. It only cost me 24 cents. When it went up to 25, I decided to boycott eggs. And they did. Well, they haven't had a raise in 10 years in Oklahoma. Join the crowd. I remember not getting a raise for, 40 years practically. I always hated that. You look at what you made when you're in your 20s, and then somehow it turns out that because of cost of living and everything, you're making the same when you ostensibly have made it. Gee, maybe it was always on paper only. Okay. Despite such conditions, Oklahoma's teachers are getting no sympathy from Republican Governor Mary Fallin, who compared them to a teenage kid that wants a better car. And she is hardly alone when it comes to Republicans who undervalue public education. They want to make money off of it, and they know that a public education basically educates the populace. And when you have an educated populace who are also tasked with the civic duty of voting, critical thinking skills cause people to vote in a particular way, and that's usually because of critical thinking. And when you're trying to brainwash people, now some experts will say that people who know a lot can be brainwashed, and that is true. But, I checked. And I was wondering how come I wasn't able to get brainwashed. Is because I never took a personality test on Facebook. They told me so, too. Do you think I really went to see if I was on the list? That's how they get you on the list. Well, Virginia's public school teachers went on strike for 9 days in late February and early March over stagnant pay, rising health care costs, and other grievances. Like Oklahoma, they've had some of the lowest salaries for public school teachers who complained that the 1% pay raise they were initially offered didn't begin to offset the ever-rising health care costs they were facing. Now, I'm a big fan of Caddyshack, and when the judge tips the kid who's the caddy and throws like a couple of quarters on the table, and the kid looks at it and, oh, thank you. And then when the judge turns his back, he kind of drops the quarters on the ground and wipes his hands like it's dirty. Yeah, it's an insult. And please, people, do not put coin on the bar for your bartender. Leave a bill. If you can't leave a bill, it's better not to leave anything. Okay? The coin is an insult. I'm old school that way. Excuse me. Feeling empowered by their counterparts in West Virginia, Kentucky's public school teachers have been staging sickouts and large rallies, and they have many of the same complaints, including stagnant wages, inadequate school supplies, and overcrowded classrooms. Teachers have also been vehement in their opposition to GOP efforts to defund their pension system in Kentucky, which, like Oklahoma, is a right-to-work-for-less state full of anti-union politicians. Both Kentucky's U.S. Senators Rand Paul and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are hard-right Republicans, as are Governor Matt Bevin and most of the state legislature. Well, of course, they're just rolling in Russian money. And McConnell knows. That's why he's not going to protect Mueller. He knows that if he protects Mueller, Mueller knows who has all that Russian money. Do you really think that when you have how many our side have been voting, and we can just like vote and in overwhelming majorities, and we never even get to have any political clout. We sometimes always just come up a little bit short. Kind of makes sense now when you think of how much money has been passed around. Remember when Boehner was down on the floor there passing out bags of cash from the tobacco lobby? They were right there. They were just unabashed. Okay, well, of course, Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education in the Trump administration, showed her cluelessness when she implied that Oklahoma striking teachers are selfish individuals who are putting their own needs over their students. I hope that adults would keep adult disagreements and disputes in a separate place and serve the students that are there to be served. Well, she doesn't get it, does she? When textbooks and chairs are falling apart and teachers have to take a second or third job in order to make ends meet, it's hardly advantageous for the students. The conditions that Republicans have been promoting in public schools in Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kentucky, and other red states are not those of an advanced economy, but rather a third-rate banana republic. Next up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is by Christine Wang from the CNBC. European Commission investigators raided 21st Century Fox's London office yesterday. Sources at the location told the newspaper that authorities were trying to be discreet and had been told to keep details of their mission confidential. The Telegraph reported that investigators will be on site through today and maybe tomorrow. Shares of Fox fell more than 1% in extended trading, and the raid comes amid Fox's drawn-out takeover of Sky, which has fallen under intense scrutiny by regulators at the UK's Competition and Markets Authority. Earlier this year, the agency provisionally found Fox's bid would not be in the public interest. It said there are concerns that the deal may lead to the Murdoch family trust wielding too much influence over public opinion and the political agenda. Wow, they know how to do it over there, don't they? Well, the Fox Network Group said in a statement that to CNBC that it is cooperating fully with the European Commission inspection. While such inspections are part of the Commission's process of looking into allegations of anti-competitive practices, it emphasized that the relevant companies have a right to be heard in proceedings, and the Commission did not list which companies had their offices inspected on Tuesday also. Up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article out of the UN News Service. The UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, told an emergency meeting of the Security Council that they have to prevent the uncontrollable escalation that's occurring in Syria right now. And I think that it's probably going to fall on deaf ears because Trump needs to bomb some tarmacs, and he's just got to do it. And that's going to escalate the issue. But don't worry, the void will be filled by, who Trump feels is the appropriate entities to fill it, and Putin's okay with in his eyes, and he'll do anything for Vlad. Well, this is an emergency Security Council meeting. De Mistura wants complete respect for Security Council Resolution 2401, in which the body should demand an immediate cease to hostilities and conditions that would enable humanitarian aid deliveries and medical evacuations of those in need. We got to get the refugees out, but Trump hates refugees. Let's get to our break now, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and then the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. In his farewell address, George Washington warned against the dangers of party and faction. He believed in the virtues of nonpartisan government, in which patriotic citizens of different views would be willing to serve together. George Washington's great stature as a national hero and his willingness to serve for 2 terms bridged strong regional differences and gave the new government time to take root before party factions could become divisive. At the same time, however, Washington's belief in a strong executive and his nationalist sentiments inclined him to favor Alexander Hamilton's policies over Thomas Jefferson's. Washington's warnings against party and faction to the contrary, he was in many respects the country's first Federalist president. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
The Trump administration Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross has glued onto the 2020 census form a question about citizenship. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Adding that question, as the Trump administration knows, will undermine the validity of the census by suppressing participation by immigrants, which is, after all, the whole point of adding that question at the last minute. Many citizens, non-citizens, lawful permanent residents, and undocumented persons will, of course, not participate in the census because they fear or believe rightly, given the Trump administration antipathy towards immigrants, that answering the census might jeopardize themselves or their families. This is Trumpian voter suppression again. The political effect will be to reduce congressional seats in Democratic-leaning states like California and increase Republican representation in the Congress. All this giving us a front row seat to a raw, politically motivated assault on our Constitution, again, this time Section 2 of Article 1, which requires a nationwide census called an enumeration, which means count everyone every 10 years. Fortunately, 12 states are suing the Trump administration over the addition of the citizenship question to the census. In court, hopefully the states, the people, and the values of honesty and integrity and an accurate census will win. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox, Virginia. Grant's Union Army successfully cut off Confederate forces at the village of Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Historians agree the terms were generous to the Confederacy. The surrender marked the beginning of the end of the Civil War, with 3 more key surrenders before the end of May. Half the country was in ruins, with as many as 750,000 dead. In the North alone, millions more lay seriously injured. At least 40,000 formerly enslaved blacks died fighting for their freedom. It was considered the country's turning point. The Civil War ended the slave system, forged a centralized federal government and created a national structure for the institutional development of public health, veteran care, and aid programs. The era of Reconstruction ushered in a period of hope and opportunity for black freedom, equality, and prosperity. But historian Gregory Downs argues in his book After Appomattox, Military Occupation and the Ends of the War, that the war did not really end in 1865. The South was essentially under military occupation until at least 1871. Downs writes, quote, "By severing the war's conflict from the Reconstruction that followed, it drained meaning from the Civil War and turned it into a family feud, a fight that ended with regional reconciliation. Once white Southern Democrats overthrew Reconstruction, they utilized the Appomattox myth to erase the connection between the popular, neatly concluded Civil War and the continuing battles of Reconstruction." For Eric Foner, the period was one of revolution and counter-revolution, a massive experiment in interracial democracy without precedent. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Unions in Australia are campaigning against tax avoidance practices of multinational corporations, taxes which could be used to fund necessary public services such as health care. Most recently, the unions have been focusing on the global gas giant ExxonMobil. An Australian Senate report showed that the corporation will not pay any taxes at all until 2021. In fact, the company has not paid any taxes for the past 3 years, despite making billions in revenue from operations in the country. Last year, the company demanded that some of its employees take a 30% wage cut. Troy Carter, a representative of the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, the AMWU, comments.
To then find out later on that they're not paying any tax on top of that was really made us angry and more determined that, look, we've got to fight to change these rules that are giving multinational corporations, big companies, the opportunity to do this to the Australian working class. ExxonMobil, as we've just found out in the Senate inquiry, haven't paid any corporate tax for the last 3 years, don't intend on paying any corporate tax until 2021. One of the main things is, ensure that ExxonMobil start paying their tax for starters, for the good of everyone, for the good of our country. Had they paid their tax last year, we could have employed, it's really not employed, but it's cost us 16,000 nurses. We could have run the Royal Children's Hospital for 2 years. We're going to be asking people to donate. It all comes back down to the workers again, but yet Exxon paid their tax alone. That would be enough, to pay for the Royal Children's Hospital for the next 2 years. The whole complete running cost of that.
Teachers are expected to play many roles as they educate young people. The challenge, according to Education International, is how to train teachers to play these roles effectively. EI is the global union for teachers and other educators. It represents some 32 million workers in 172 countries. At a recent conference of teachers and government representatives, the General Secretary of Education International, David Edwards, was asked about the complexity of adequately training teachers to provide quality education.
We are expecting somewhere around 22 to 23 discrete and different things from teachers, all the ways from being social workers to be able to teach content, to be able to help kids collaborate, to be able to reach out to communities, to do all these different kinds of things. So we have very, very, very high expectations of teachers. That is a challenge. The opportunity we have is that between governments and teachers' unions, we can have an institutionalized dialogue. We can have a single platform around a national flag, around our own children, and we can address what the strategies are going to be if this is the kind of teacher that we want to be teaching in our schools. What is the kind of system that we need to develop to ensure that? What's the kind of community expectations? And then we have to talk about the resources that we would need. So I think we are understanding that now that teaching is very complex. We understand that teachers are at the absolute core of instruction and education, and it will not be something that we can get a new technology to take care of. It will not be something that children will be able to educate themselves. So now the great opportunity is to do the really, really hard work where everything else has been exhausted. We've tried everything else except that one thing, which is actually collaborating together around solutions that are based on evidence. And that's the real opportunity we have.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's newscasts are available on its website, Facebook, iTunes, union websites, and community radio stations. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The U.S. and its allies are weighing military strikes against Syria's government after an emergency UN Security Council meeting on Monday evening cast doubt on whether countries could agree on how to investigate an alleged chemical attack blamed on President Bashar al-Assad. Despite a likely Russian veto, the U.S. is reportedly pushing for a Tuesday afternoon vote on a resolution that would send independent chemical weapons inspectors to probe the scene of the crime. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley made it clear the U.S. doesn't need Russia's permission to act.
History will record this as the moment when the Security Council either discharged its duty or demonstrated its utter and complete failure to protect the people of Syria. Either way, the United States will respond.
Trump himself has said Assad's alleged actions won't go unpunished.
It will be met, and it will be met forcefully.
According to the Times of London, French President Emmanuel Macron is on board with multinational strikes against the Syrian military, and he's pressuring British Prime Minister Theresa May to sign on to military action as well. And President Trump has canceled a trip to the Summit of the Americas this week in Peru, citing the need to focus on the crisis in Syria. But there are reasons to suggest a lack of progress on the president's cornerstone trade policy. A renegotiation of NAFTA could explain his absence. Last week, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer pressured Mexico and Canada to wrap up trade talks so the president could announce a deal in Peru. But at that time, only 6 of NAFTA's 30 chapters had been agreed. On Monday, Mexico's trade representative said a deal was unlikely this week, though he expressed confidence something could be worked out by next month. Just hours later, the White House pulled the plug on the trip. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Well, thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is our daily special. Will no one rid me of this priest? Listen, if you get some avocado toast at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, you better expect to get some sprouts with it too, okay? And I would think another slice of toast in which to put it on top, and then you'll have an avocado and sprout sandwich. I'm old school that way. Okay, let's get down to the weather from around the world, and we always begin along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees at the mothership here in the hills above the town proper. I am in town, but I'm just on the hill just above, the city center. Town center, village, square, just above it. Well, we're 43 degrees here, and we will be having quite a bit of rain. We're looking at about a half an inch today. with a high of 57 degrees, which will probably be more like 60, low 60s. Winds will be out of the southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. They're currently out of the south at a negligible 1 mile per hour. And showers will continue tonight, where we expect just about a quarter of an inch overnight. Winds will be out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow, get this. We're going to have a high of 51 tomorrow, but then a low in the 30s, and they're calling for about a quarter inch of a mix of rain and snow. They can't do that to me, whoever they are, okay? But they can't do it. I just got my little baby reds and my yellow Yukon potatoes planted in their appropriate large containers, by the way. I got strawberries in the ground. I have one of the first seedling starts of tomatoes. Freezing can't be allowed at this point, please. Plus, what about my fruit trees? Oh, my God. All right. Well, no data on air quality today, and probably that's good. But I think because it's raining so hard, maybe not such a issue. Pressure is, it's falling at 29.84 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles per hour. And humidity here in Rogue River, Oregon, is 86%. All righty. Well, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Okay. London is 51 and cloudy. Paris is 66 and sunny. Springtime in Paris. Ooh. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 72 and fair. Kabul is 57 and fair. Hong Kong, 71 and partly cloudy. Tokyo, 66 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia, is 70 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California, is 51 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York, is 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and fair as springtime can be. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. First story here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is out of the LA Times by Richard Winton. In Blue, California, Kern County Sheriff Donnie Youngblood has long bucked the liberal trend. He's fought California's sanctuary state movement, asked that Kern be labeled a law and order county, and stood up for deputies accused of misconduct. When the county paid $3.4 million to the family of a man who died in a confrontation with his deputies, Youngblood opposed the settlement and chastised family members, wondering aloud whether they wished their loved one hadn't been a meth addict. Now, the sheriff faces new questions. He was caught on videotape telling an employees' union that it is better financially to kill suspects than to cripple them. Now, of course, this isn't something that we've suspected all along about police departments in general, if not this specific police agency. But when you have experts going around and training recruits and policemen that to get out of any liability lawsuits, even though they have implied immunity, still, there can be some civil suits that can be drawn. Or just to get through internal affairs investigation. If you kill someone, always tell everybody that you are afraid they had a gun. Just say it. That was a toy. That was a cell phone. Thought it was a gun. Better that you're alive and they're dead, because your life is worth a lot more than the people that you're supposed to protect and serve. Anyway, those dead people aren't the people you're protecting and serving. I mean, this is essentially what these classrooms teach. That the cost of a human life is determined through the adversarial process, and maybe sometimes non-binding arbitration. For Youngblood, a sheriff who is known for his controversial remarks in a county with a high number of shootings by cops relative to its population, the 12-year-old recording released by Kern County Detention Officers Association is creating more questions. The release of the tape comes as the union representing Kern County's jailers is endorsing Youngblood's opponent in the upcoming election. Oh, a police union that's... Okay, we got the battle of the police unions now. Youngblood was seeking the union's endorsement in 2006 when he posed the question: when a deputy shoots somebody, which way is better financially? To cripple them or kill them? Which is better financially for the county? Kill them can be heard out of view of the camera? Absolutely, Youngblood responds, because if you cripple them, you have to take care of them for life, and that cost goes way up. But once they're dead in the ground, there's a fixed cost on the casket. And a lot of times they don't even give them a casket. Just throw them in the bare ground, throw some lime on it, and forget about it. I'm sorry, that was in this reporter's opinion. The minute-long video made public on Monday by the union shows Youngblood during an interview before his 26th election, sitting at a table facing an audience. The sheriff, who is out of uniform, is discussing the union giving him an endorsement when the topic turns to the loss of life involving police and the matters of dollars and cents. The sheriff said the difference between killing and wounding a person on the street or in custody is millions and millions of dollars. And I guess, when a guy when a guy makes a bad shooting on somebody and kills them, $3 million, and the family goes away after a long back and forth. When it happens in corrections, it's a totally different ballgame. The remarks are particularly controversial because the Guardian newspaper in 2015 found the county had the nation's highest per capita rate of killings by police officers. The state attorney general and the ACLU have ongoing investigations into the department. A Vietnam War veteran, Youngblood grew up working in the potato sheds around Bakersfield and said he's happiest hiking or riding his quarter horse Sparky. He has raised the ire of Democrats for his willingness to involve immigration authorities in his jails. Well, of course you would expect this guy to be a racist also. I don't know, maybe he fantasizes about being on the old slave patrols, and that's why he's a sheriff now. The same union endorsed Youngblood after the recording. All three unions representing deputies have endorsed Youngblood's challenger in the June primary. Well, the union has declined to make public the entire tape. He sounds like a bad guy. And like I said, it sounds like a battle of the police unions here. And, let's get some popcorn.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Finishing up here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is an offering by the great Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media. Queen Elizabeth only needed 4 words to make her opinion of Trump clear. The head of the royal family was speaking to host David Attenborough while giving him a tour of their garden for a TV special, when they were interrupted by the loud noise of a helicopter passing overhead. "Sounds like President Trump," she remarked, visibly annoyed. The statement reflects the unusual animosity that has existed between the U.S. and its closest ally, the United Kingdom, since Trump took control of the presidency. He is the first American president since 1977 not to visit the United Kingdom. His 2 immediate predecessors, Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush, both visited the UK during their first year in office. In January 2018, news that Trump was planning a state visit prompted plans for a massive counter-protest. Prime Minister Theresa May of the Conservative Party had extended an invitation, but Labour Member of Parliament David Lammy said Trump's visit would see the biggest protest this country has ever seen. Trump has reportedly demanded a ride in a gold-plated carriage alongside the Queen should he visit, a luxury President Obama chose to forgo. Because look what they did to him for wearing a tan suit. I know that was a little later on in his presidency, but just look what they did to him for wearing a tan suit. Looked good, too. The royal family largely stays tight-lipped about Trump, but the signs are clear that he would not be welcome. Actress Meghan Markle, who is engaged to Prince Harry, has accurately described Trump as divisive and misogynistic. Prince Harry has been publicly close to the Obamas and co-hosted the Invictus Games for a wounded military with them. There was speculation in the UK media that British officials feared the political consequences if the couple decided to invite Barack and Michelle Obama, with whom they are friends, but not Donald Trump. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, citing Trump's track record of bigoted rhetoric, particularly toward Muslims, said he would not be welcome in the capital city for a visit. Even May was pushed to publicly rebuke Trump after he promoted a series of anti-Muslim videos from a UK-based hate group, Britain First. As in America, Trump is unpopular in the UK, and largely for the same reasons. His sexism, his racism, and wholehearted embrace of bigotry. His insults about the country's National Health Service didn't help either. Even the Queen appears to think Trump lacks any amount of charm or interest. And when a blaring and annoying noise interrupted her, his name was the first thing that came to mind. All right, indeed. Well, I'll leave you with that, and we will visit with you tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. That's our daily special for tomorrow. A little bit of spice in your life, of course. And just a heads up, when Mueller gets fired, and it's going to happen. And, there may be a few chess pieces that are going to move around. Rosenstein here and Christopher Wray impeached over there. But Netroots Radio will be going on the air live with quite an extensive panel of analysts and pundits of political acumen to analyze the situation for you. So stay tuned for that. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Cohen. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.